Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden, and it is free agency time, baby. The opening day hasn't been the craziest that we've seen in recent years, but it has been interesting nonetheless. And of course, the biggest fish out there from the jump, Logan, in this offseason has been Paul George. And while we don't have an official announcement yet on where he will be signing, there is a strong indication that it is going to be with the Sixers. They are considered very clear frontrunners. They're meeting with him potentially as we speak. They intend to offer him a 4-year, $212 million deal that he is expected to accept. And the Clippers are definitively done with him. They have announced a mutual parting of the ways. They put out a whole official statement. So it looks, Logan, like PG is going to be a Sixer, which has been the expectation for a little bit now. How much does that boost Philly's outlook as a potential title contender, in your opinion?
To me, this stamps Philadelphia as the third team out east. I think it would be really hard for them to do anything to surpass New York, but I think you could make an argument that maybe you like Philadelphia a little bit more than them. I like New York's depth at this point. We'll have to see how Philadelphia, configures the rest of their roster to really make a judgment call on that. But to me, they're stamped as a top three legitimate contender out east. I, of course, knew that Paul George was going to sign with Philadelphia the second that it was reported that his wife followed Embiid's wife on social media. First of all,
that's why you're the best. And that's why you're the best in the biz, Logan.
Dude, I, of course, was sitting patiently at my computer waiting with bated breath to figure out
You're the one who broke that news.
I know. Seriously, though, to the people that actually break that news, how do you guys figure that out? Like, I don't know, man.
Bots. I think they have it automated somehow.
That baffles me. But the bread trail was there very early this afternoon, and of course, I followed it the entire way. This, to me, it's a huge game changer. And when you look at how different Paul George's role is going to be in Philadelphia, that's why I love this for him and Philadelphia both. One, he doesn't have to be the number two anymore, right? I just think they were asking Paul George to go above and beyond and play beyond his means in this last playoff run. And with his expectations as being the number two in LA, one, it's been really difficult. Kawhi not being healthy for basically any playoff run. You're asking PG to be your number one. He's just not equipped to do that. What he is equipped to do is be your number three and play that role to absolute perfection. That's why I love this move for Philadelphia and for Paul George both. I think Philadelphia is much more well-equipped to contend. The West is way deeper. Your roster, you have question marks about. He joins a top 5 player in basketball, or top 10, depending on where you have Joel Embiid. And he joins an awesome number 2 in Tyrese Maxey, right? He can step in here and play the catch and shoot role. He can be a tertiary ball handler and playmaker. He can defend his ass off. And again, you're just not expecting as much from him, right? He can give you an efficient 20 a night and just fill in where you need him. I love this for Philadelphia. I love this for Paul George. Philadelphia is a legit contender, man. Like I said, we'll have to see what they do with the rest of the roster to really determine where they stand in the hierarchy out east. But this legitimizes Philadelphia as a real contender. And when all these teams are getting better, when New York is getting better, when Boston has committed to their core and have all their guys locked up, you talk about this all the time, Carson, free agency. It's an arms race, man. And if you're not getting better, you were effectively getting worse. And this is a huge move for both sides, and I think it's really beneficial. This legitimizes Philadelphia as a real contender.
Absolutely. I love it. This clearly puts them in a better position than they've been in since 2019, that year that they lost on the Kawhi crazy shot when they were pretty loaded with Jimmy. And when you talk about how they match up against some of the other best teams, they're definitively in the top 3 out east, and I can't see anybody else surpassing them. The Bucks, even if they have the dynamic duo, can they make the moves on the periphery of the roster to improve significantly? I don't think they're catching up to Philly, because not only are we talking about a great level of talent with these 3 stars now, and in a matchup against the Knicks, I think I would slightly prefer New York too, because the depth is so absurd, because they have 4 really good, like top 60 basketball players, and then 4 more awesome role players on top of that. If they can keep Isaiah Hartenstein, then that's even more overwhelmingly the case. But it's also an intuitive fit here. Maxey and Embiid already have an excellent 2-man game going. They are one of the best pick and roll tandems in basketball. And Embiid is so dominant as a scorer. He demands such ridiculous amounts of attention. Maxey is one of the best guards at capitalizing on that. He is one of the best spot-up shooting star guards that you have in basketball. He doesn't need to be overwhelmingly ball dominant. And so they just have an excellent thing going already. And they're two awesome basketball players. And then PG slides in, as you say, as a guy who on any given night could give you 35 points. But as a third option, that's where you're most comfortable with him, because at this stage of his career, he's not exerting the sort of consistent rim pressure that he used to in his younger days. And although he is still an efficient on-ball creator, he's going to score with 75th percentile isolation efficiency. That's what he did this past year. Excellent pick and roll efficiency, actually 90th percentile there, mostly just on the back of his insane pull-up shooting. But he is at his best in a role that balances that and allows him to thrive off ball, allows him to kill you as a spot-up shooter where he is out of this world, one of the best catch-and-shoot players on the planet, and doesn't put that consistent burden on him to night after night be one of your two guys offensively. Still a really good wing defender. Everybody's always going to clown on PG. A lot of people are. But a lot of that is about expectations, and it is about role, and it is about him being overtasked with Kawhi down for the Clippers. In a lot of ways, he just had a career season, Logan, in terms of like the net swing that you're getting, his on-off numbers. Like the Clippers were a dominant basketball team with him on the floor. His efficiency was the best of his career. Him thriving alongside two volume ball handlers like James Harden, like Kawhi. He is an incredibly malleable star. He's still, to me, clearly one of the 25 best players on the planet. And this is absolutely a big-time win for Philly. They needed something like this because last year, even though like individually, I liked some of their role players. I thought that Kelly Oubre was bringing you awesome value defensively. You don't get a DeAnthony Melton healthy, but I really like him. Nick Batum was playing at a really high level defensively and was bringing you pretty good spot-up shooting. But there was just a clear lack of any sort of dynamic third offensive player on this team. And so you're doubling Embiid aggressively, and sometimes his playmaking is breaking down. Sometimes there's just not enough offensive skill around him to punish you for that. And Oubre was complicit in that. Tobias Harris, who I'm sure all Phillies fans are just so relieved that he is gone, was a major letdown consistently in that department. PG changed that dynamic. Now you have another third really high-level offensive player who can defend, who brings you size, who brings you length. And they've already made some moves just in terms of building out this roster because they basically have a blank slate around these guys, presuming that they do sign PG. They bring in Andre Drummond on a 2-year, $10 million deal. Your backup center, that's solid. That's actually pretty good value, I would say. He's at least going to bring you really high-level rebounding, simple play finishing, solid backup big. They sign Eric Gordon for 1 year. Daryl Morey loves Eric Gordon. Clearly, he always wants that man on his basketball team. That's fine. I wouldn't want him starting at the 2, but I think that he is a more than capable role player. He's still an awesome spot-up shooter. He's still a pretty solid closeout attacker. He can compete defensively at the point of attack. Not a bad signing. Seems like they're going to let Batum walk, which is unfortunate. They'll have to find somebody to supplement that value as a bigger wing alongside PG. They bring in Jared McCain in the draft, who I think will be a pretty safe and pro-ready guy from the jump. Now, I think the ceiling there is pretty limited, but you're getting spot-up shooting that is going to be valuable. He's very, very good there. You're getting a competitive defender. You're getting a sound playmaker. Outside of the shooting, there's nothing he's really going to do at a high level, but he's going to compete. He's going to be a pretty solid all-around contributor. So we'll see what they can do. But priority number one for them always had to be getting PG. It always had to be raising the ceiling to that level, because even if you made good role player moves, I don't think you were going to meaningfully change the outlook as much as you can just by adding PG. So I think it was absolutely the right course of action, presuming that they do get this done tonight.
Right? $40 game out there every single night. Like, he was giving you nothing in the playoffs, and now you get somebody that's legitimately perfectly alongside Maxey and Embiid. And that's my favorite aspect of this. You mentioned it. You're adding a 44% catch and shooter. You're adding a guy that, while PG may have lost some of his athleticism, right? That's just naturally going to happen as you get older. He's grown as a decision maker and a playmaker, right? He's gotten so much better at that across the years. And for people who are critical of PG, Carson, I would almost say that I think Paul George overachieved in his time in LA, considering the circumstances. Like, he took them to a Western Conference Finals basically by himself, right? With
that was some of the best basketball he's ever played.
It was heroic, right? And so I don't really put any of that's the curse of the Clippers, man. That is a franchise that is seemingly never going to get right. I don't put any of their shortcomings on PG. And I also love the moves that they made on the margins, man. Filling in that backup 5 spot with somebody that you at least trust to do a job simply. They're trotting Mo Bamba and Paul Reed out there in backup 5 spots. Those guys are both flawed to an extent. I'm a big Paul Reed guy, but he's undersized when you're trotting him out there at the 5. I love this. And again, I think it's really going to be hard for them to surpass Boston or New York, but they're there. They are right there with them, right? They are going to be super competitive, and they have improved massively from last season. Considering that Paul George was the biggest fish on the market, I think up to this point, Philadelphia's won the offseason. Would you agree?
It's a big win. Listen, I don't know if there's only one winner out of the 30 teams, but I think that they definitely are a winner. I think that they're a big winner, and it'll be interesting to see who they do try to commit to bringing back, because they are going to have limited cap after this PG signing. You have Buddy Hield hitting the open market. You have Melton hitting the open market. So they'll have to, again, to me, find another big forward who can play alongside PG. I don't think you consistently want him guarding 4s. He's a versatile defensive player. That would be the spot that I'm looking at. If Eric Gordon ends up starting at your 2, maybe it's not ideal, as I said earlier, but I also don't think that that is the end of the world. On the flip side of this, Logan, the Clippers era with PG and Kawhi is over, and we saw a grand total of 1 healthy postseason with both those guys on the floor. They started 2021 playoffs healthy, but then, as you mentioned, it ended up being PG just finishing the job without Kawhi. They extended James Harden for 2 years, $70 million today, but they could not come to terms with PG. What we heard was that they didn't want to offer him a 4th year at a really high dollar value, and that's what PG did want, and that's what Philly is prepared to offer him. What do you make of them being willing to part ways, and what is just your outlook on their overall state of affairs?
They're chopped. Clippers are chopped.
R.I.P.
To me, Carson, it is inexcusable that that's where you draw the line. Considering all of the capital that you gave up to go in and acquire him, I don't care. You just can't lose out on everything that you gave up. You know what? The picks, there's always a certain danger that comes with the draft picks. The Gobert trade, right? You can point to any superstar trade nowadays. When you give up that kind of capital, it's dangerous. The cherry on top is that you lost Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, right? That's the one that's going to come back to bite you. My thing, Carson, is that you already gave all of that capital up. So why are you afraid of committing to 1 more year of Paul George? Like, you've effectively given up all that for nothing. They had to win the title in that window where they had PG, they had Kawhi, they had the guys, they had the team. You've effectively eliminated your championship window. And I'm not saying like I would have picked the Clippers to do any big damage or like they're my title front runner. No, the Clippers are probably somewhere in that 5 to 8 range. They're not in the upper echelon of contenders. But by not re-signing Paul George, you've eliminated any chance that you had at contention, right? We get caught up in playoff results and make that the be-all, end-all. You remember, Carson, there was a time where we discussed on the show if the Clippers were the second or maybe favorite team out west with how they were playing at a portion of this season, right? There was a window of this year where they looked like they could be a title frontrunner or maybe the second best team out west. And I think that would have been enough for me to bite hook, line, and sinker on giving him that 4th year. Again, it's the fact that by drawing the line there, you have eliminated any chance of your team contending, and it just has ripple effects, right? When is Kawhi frustrated and fed up? When is James Harden frustrated and fed up? I think it's a really foolish maneuver by the Clippers, man. Because of all the capital that I gave up initially to acquire Paul George, I would have given him basically any contract that he would have asked for. Is it going to be a bad contract in 3 to 4 years? Maybe. That's what you have to just accept because you gave all of that up to get PG. And I just think that their title window has effectively closed now, man. I think the Clippers gaffed on this. I would have given PG whatever he wanted.
Their title window is 100% closed, and it was pretty darn slim already. Like, I would have been really surprised if things came together well enough for the Clippers to win a title. Maybe the single biggest component in that being availability, specifically of Kawhi Leonard. As we mentioned, one healthy postseason in all the years of this experiment with him and PG. That held them back more than any of their slight basketball limitations we could talk about. And they were awesome throughout last regular season when they cared, especially. You hinted at that 26-6 stretch where they were just completely dominant. And then end of the regular season, they let their foot off the gas. It's an older team. They'd already secured a top 4 seed. They stopped defending at the level that they had been, but that was a team that had overwhelming offensive skill. Harden was playing extremely efficient basketball until the end of the regular season, was facilitating at such a high level. PG was thriving away from the ball. Kawhi was playing extremely efficient. They were defending at quite a high level overall. Zoo was doing his thing on the interior, both defensively and offensively. Terrence Mann, you have another solid 3-and-D wing out there. Things were really clicking for that team. And I never would have viewed them as the favorite out west, but they're on the short list of teams that, okay, if things go right, if you can stay healthy, which is unlikely for them, but you have a puncher's chance. And maybe you look at that and you say, okay, well, that's not enough. That's not enough for us to continue to recommit to this core. I would understand that if you weren't already committed and if you weren't already screwed, because you're already committed to Kawhi. You just recommitted to James Harden, and it's a shorter term deal, right? So that is obviously more favorable for you than paying Paul George for a full 4 years. But you're screwed no matter what, man. You don't have control over a single one of your own first round picks through 2029. You have 3 swaps, and then you have 2 picks that you flat out dealt. So you are going to be picking every other year in the 20s in the first round. That's all of the opportunity that you have to add young talent through the draft. So at that point, it's just your job to field as strong a basketball team as you can. And I get it if you don't want to give PG a 4th year because of your situation. You're thinking, okay, maybe in a couple years, 3 years, we can move on from this situation. No, we won't have control of our own picks just yet, but whatever. We can slowly move towards a rebuild. The one thing that you cannot allow to happen, in my opinion, is to just let PG walk, to let him walk and not get any value for that. And I understand if you're thinking, oh, we don't want to do a sign and trade with our Western Conference competitors, but that doesn't justify like haggling the Nuggets saying, no, MPJ and a little bit of draft capital isn't enough. Like, we are going to push for the absolute most draft value we can get on top of MPJ, who in a vacuum is a win. You are getting a player in his mid-20s who immediately is a good third option for you. Of course, he's not as good as Paul George, but you have the ability to say, this is a guy who helps us win now, who we believe as a top 3 option could actually be valuable for us down the line. We could sign him to another contract if we don't want to hold on to him. He has trade value in multiple places. You're getting an asset. You're getting a real valuable asset. And the fact that they didn't understand the situation and that they misplayed their hand, that they overplayed their hand there, to me is just frustrating. And I don't understand why you aren't fighting to keep PG, because you should be fighting to keep him. But if you are of the mind that, okay, we just don't want to commit to him for that long, you have to find a way to get something back for your future and also for the immediate, because you don't have draft assets now in return for PG, and you don't have win now assets. And it's like, if you do let PG walk, you know you're not winning the title. There's no path there. With him, it's a real long shot. Without him, do you really care if you're making Denver better? Because your goal is just going to be to win 48 games. You're not winning the title with James Harden as your second option. Just too inconsistent, too volatile at this stage in his career. Kawhi, there's no reason to expect that he is going to be on the floor for a playoff run. So I wouldn't be prioritizing my rivalries, trying to milk every last asset out of the Warriors either, over trying to salvage what is a bad basketball situation. Maybe their goal is, hey, we don't want to be attached to any other contract. We want to bring in DeMar DeRozan cheaper, get him on a 2-year, $60 million deal or something. Okay, I don't necessarily hate the DeRozan fit with the Clippers, but you're still adding an aging star. Obviously, he's just not as good a basketball player as PG, and the ceiling with PG is way higher. The upside with DeMar is if you are down Kawhi, he can step in as an on-ball creator and be more of a legit second and at times first option if you are shorthanded. But what's the ceiling with that? It's maybe sneaking out of the first round. The ceiling with PG as your second best player, maybe even your third option offensively sometimes, is just much better. If your goal is to contend legitimately, he is essential to that. And there's no other route to me. There's no parlaying this into a rebuild. It just doesn't make sense. It is a disappointing end to a disappointing era. And I just think they were in a position where you had to stay all in. It's not great. It's not ideal, but you made your bed. And at this point, you're going to a new arena. There's no path to recouping all the assets that you've given up. Do what you can to remain like a legitimately good basketball team. And they'll be solid next year, but they won't be as good as they could have been with PG. And I think they're going to regret not getting any assets back for him in some sort of sign and trade.
I completely agree. I don't have a ton to add. You try to make the most competitive team possible. You try to be on the fringes of contention. And in the playoffs, you cross your fingers and you hope and pray that something breaks your way. It's not great. It's not an enviable position. You're not going to be a title front runner. It's like, you're telling me there's a chance, man. It's Dumb and Dumber. You're telling me there's a chance, and you need to bank all in on that chance. The crux of this, Carson, as you said, is that you got back nothing for Paul George. And the Nuggets one is a freaking conundrum to me. The fact that Denver would offer you MPJ and you didn't snap at that, it's foolish to me, man.
Agreed. And I think some people will want to look back at this entire Clippers era and say 5 years, what did you accomplish? You made one conference finals. You blew a 3-1 lead in the first year. That's it in terms of your playoff success. I still don't think the process of building a team around Kawhi and PG at that moment in time was bad. Kawhi was coming off of a dominant title run. He had only up to that point had the one significant injury in his career. He was playing clearly like a top 3 dude on the planet. PG was coming off of a year in which he was third in MVP voting, was playing the best basketball of his career, 2 elite defensive wings, 2 versatile offensive players. It's just Kawhi's health. And we can look back and say, oh, well, the writing was always on the wall with that. But it wasn't. It really wasn't. It was just the 2018 season. Outside of that, he had never been the most healthy guy, but he had never had a significant injury. It's just been extremely downhill ever since then. That's what has done this Clippers era in more than any single basketball decision, roster building around those guys, or even shortcomings of those guys individually. Just the fact that the Kawhi couldn't stay healthy, and that sucks for them. All right. Another big signing of the day, Logan. This one is official, has been for some time. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has signed with the Orlando Magic. This was my favorite fit for him if he were to leave Denver. 3 years, $66 million is the deal. Let's start with Orlando's side of this. How do you feel about the fit? What does this do for their basketball outlook next year?
This is a perfect signing for Orlando. I think it addresses a massive need. I think it's a great fit at great value. $22 million a year is not an overpay by any means for KCP. I think that's appropriate. And I think this has stamped Orlando as a top 3 defense. I think it's Boston. I think it's Minnesota. And I think it's Orlando. They were number 2 in defensive rating last season. You think about the lineups that they can field: Suggs, KCP, Wagner, Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr., Jonathan Isaac. Just have a lot of guys who can defend their ass off. And Orlando was 30th in three-pointers made this season. They were 29th in three-pointers attempted. They were 24th in three-point percentage. And in the playoffs, they shot just 31% from behind the arc. And the guy that was starting where KCP will start, Gary Harris, shot 29% from the field and shot 32% from behind the arc. So when you're just looking at going from a guy like Gary Harris to KCP, you're now getting a 40% catch and shooter, a guy who shot 40% overall from deep, and a tremendous point of attack defender. It's a dream fit. I still don't love Orlando's avenue to easy half-court offense. You know, no. I really would love if they could add that high-level creator at the guard spot, you know, where they could run just varied lineups, right, with Suggs maybe at the 2 or KCP at the 2. But that guy's really hard to find. And so when you can get a guy at this kind of value who is going to address a clear need for you, who is going to upgrade your defense even more, it's a home run. It's a great fit. It's great value. It's a great basketball player that fits right in with your basketball team. It's a huge get for Orlando. And it's a great signing, man. I'm not going to dress it up any more than that, dude. KCP is one of the best role players in basketball.
Absolutely, dude. Clearly somewhere between a top 75, top 100 guy on the planet. Just absolutely a winning basketball player through and through. Epitomizes the skill set that we have been touting as an NBA world as like what you want from your wings if they're not going to be a star. This is the 3-and-D guy. Like, he is an elite point of attack defender. He is a consistent 40% three-point shooter. On top of that, he's a really good closeout attacker. He is an elite transition defender. He just does so many things. He plays so hard. He cuts well. He moves without the ball. I think that Denver has definitely benefited him there. That's just such a great situation to play in to incentivize ball movement. And that just kind of makes him an awesome fit anywhere. And this dollar value, to me, I am 100% comfortable with if I'm Orlando. They are in a position where right now they have money to spend. Does this solve their biggest issue? Absolutely not. Their biggest issue is going to be that seamless half-court creation. It is going to be relieving Paolo and Franz of sort of the overwhelming duties that they have at this point, getting them a real lead guard. But they have time to target that guy. And ideally, it's somebody on their timeline. But there are a number of dudes who may become available over the next year or two, man. It could be Darius Garland. It could be somebody a level above that. Maybe they try to go out and package some assets, get themselves a Trae Young, who offensively would really change the dynamics. Like, there's multiple paths for them addressing that issue. They have to do it. But if you can significantly upgrade the Gary Harris role, if you can say Anthony Black, who was starting early in the year, didn't even play in the playoffs, but like, we want somebody who brings that defensive identity and even a little bit more and just much more offensive value. KCP is that dude. The Magic are still going to struggle to score the basketball. I mean, they had an offensive rating of 105 in the playoffs. It was brutal. They were the number 22 offense in the regular season. Part of that is the creation, the fact that Paolo and Franz can both be inefficient, that neither is an elite playmaker in terms of creating for the guys around them. Neither of them is consistently a really good spot-up shooter, but it is also the limitations of the spot-up shooting around them. And so KCP just makes them significantly better in that regard. And also, you say that they're going to be a top 3 defense. Absolutely. There's a real case that they could be the best defense in basketball, especially if they trot out the John Isaac at the 5 lineup, which isn't going to be like their regular season default starting setting. But in the playoffs, I could absolutely see them going to that. And they're going to mix in those lineups throughout the regular season. That's crazy switchability. That's crazy size, length, athleticism in the front court and back court. And Suggs and KCP are now right up there with Derek White and Drew Holiday as the best defensive backcourt in the league. I would still give the Celtics guys the edge, but it's not that big of a gap. On the flip side of this, Logan, the Denver Nuggets lose out on KCP. And this was something that we discussed extensively, and we said they should be doing everything possible to prevent. And Tony Jones reported that the Nuggets offered something similar to this to KCP, that they included a 3rd year, and that he ultimately still decided to leave. How costly do you think this is for Denver?
It's huge. I wonder if he felt like disrespected by Denver initially, or by the comments that the general manager made, Calvin Booth. Like, this is just me speculating. I don't have any, insider information about that, but I just wonder, like, if it's a similar contract. This is a guy who won a title 2 seasons ago, was a key member of that championship team. I just wonder if he felt slighted a little bit. Like, the GM came out and said, point blank period, oh yeah, Christian Brown will step up and he can give us, basically the same value. Wake up. No, Christian Brown cannot do that. The biggest difference between these guys, one, I think KCP is a better defender. I'll give Christian Brown his flowers. He's a good defender, great energy guy, athletic, big dude, strong, and the effort's off the charts, man. The dude just plays really hard. But the biggest difference is the shot. Carson, how many games in these playoffs did we see Christian Brown hesitate on a three-pointer? And that is emblematic. It's not even just the percentages, right? You're losing a 40% shooter, right? That's a component of it. You're losing a guy who is just confident. He is going to pull that thing. It scares me when that's a problem to me, Carson. I've played a lot of pickup basketball. It's if I'm playing ball with a guy, I want him to it's on go, man. If you get an open look, I don't want you to think about it. It should be unconscious. It's an open shot. I'm a good shooter. I should put it up. That's just a massive, massive blow. And it's to a team that can't really afford that. I think that Denver was dead last in three-point attempts last season, right?
Correct.
Like, that's a huge blow, dude, to lose a guy that is this efficient, that is just willing to shoot it, that is great defensively. Again, man, this is the second big loss that Denver has had rotationally since that title team. Initially, it was Bruce Brown. That happens to all championship teams. You're going to lose a good player. It's going to happen. This is number 2, man. And Denver has not replaced either of these guys with like great rotation pieces. Christian Brown can come in here and give you 75 to 80% of what KCP gives you defensively, but he is not giving you anything that KC brings floor spacing wise. And guys like this just don't grow on trees, man. And I would have done whatever it was in my power to bring this guy back. It is a massive loss to Denver. And, you know, I don't know if it moves them. We talked about this briefly last episode when this was speculative. I don't know if this moves them like concretely behind them, but the Nuggets are getting worse. And that's just a problem when other teams out West are getting better, man. It's a massive blow to Denver's championship hopes.
It is. And when you're speculating about if KCP feels slighted, I could see that. Obviously, the emotional aspect of this, these guys being human beings, you can't underestimate. Like, we're hearing a lot of talk about Klay taking the mid-level exception to go play for the Lakers because he feels disrespected by the Dubs, who were offering him $20 million a year more. Like, that's not a rational decision, right? If you're offended about the financial aspect of it, but people aren't rational. If they feel slighted, who knows what they're liable to do? I do think there's a couple more concrete, rational elements to the logic behind this decision, potentially, though. Number one, he's from Georgia, so he's way closer to his family. But more obviously, and maybe more significantly, just he's really going to pocket a couple more $1 million a year. Like, that contract may look the same on paper, but you don't have any state income tax in Florida. So effectively, you are getting a few $1 million more a year. But it's devastating for the Nuggets. And I would have gone a little bit higher, man. I wouldn't have just gone similar. I would have tried to top this. I would have gone 375. Like, I would have been comfortable paying KCP at that clip. This Nuggets starting 5 has been the best unit in basketball for the last couple of years. We're talking about plus 13 net rating. They are a machine. They have the perfect formula. And again, it kind of got disrupted by the Timberwolves, who had really good personnel to disrupt it, and their spot-up shooting let them down. If MPJ and KCP just did their jobs better, things could have been different. If Jamal Murray just did his job better, was better as a shot maker, things could have been different. I still think it's a really great balance of on and off ball talent. KCP fits the system so well as a spot-up shooter, as a cutter, and he's vital as a point of attack defender. So how do you supplement all that value? Because I do think you can replenish a good bit of the defensive value with Christian Brown. There's so much I like about Christian Brown. He's an athlete. He's a competitor. He defends. He cuts. I think he's a smart young basketball player. He's a winner, right? He won at Kansas. He's a dog, and he can shoot. Not like KCP, but he can knock down open jumpers. The biggest problem is the tentativeness, Logan. In 31 career playoff games, Christian Brown is 6 of 28 from 3. That's obviously a really bad percentage, but over that sample size, you're not necessarily just freaking out about that. It's the frequency, man. He's taking under a 3 a game and consistently hesitates, consistently passes up on those looks. I'm not saying that he can't get over that, but he's got to grow up fast, man. That's the thing with all these options, because it's going to be Christian Brown. Peyton Watson's awesome defensively. He is just significantly further away as a shooter. Cannot start him. It has to be Brown. And I really like Julian Strawther. And the vision with him was, okay, he's going to fit our system. He is an awesome spot-up shooter. He's great shooting off movement. He cuts. He has good feel. He can handle a little. He's a very solid defender. But he is not even in your playoff rotation this past year. So it's just, to me, the concern that you're overtasking these guys, that you're saying, okay, we like you as young players, but now third-year Christian Brown, just like figure out all of your offensive issues and replace the value of a top 75, 80, whatever you think KCP is, basketball player. Julian Strawther, we need you to do some of the same. Like, I still think Denver needs to make a move, and it doesn't look like they're gonna. They're not really in the Klay Thompson conversations right now. That would have to be a sign and trade. Gary Trent Jr. is a guy who I think you can at least replenish the offensive value, I mean, Gary Trent Jr. is an insane shooter. You're not getting back the defensive value of KCP. Could you actually upgrade offensively, though, with Klay? Yeah. I mean, a shooter of that caliber at that size in Denver's system without the burden of being a second or even third option, I think Klay would thrive offensively. Gary Trent Jr., lights out from beyond the arc. And when engaged, he's a solid defender. You're going to lose something defensively no matter what, though, and that's going to be a problem because KCP was the best option by far to take on those guard matchups. You're going to lose some quickness on the perimeter if you do go an option other than Brown. And if Brown is the plan, then you're just losing some real offensive value. And if they don't do anything, if they just sit on their hands, then they are actively falling behind, man. And I don't even know that I point at any team out west and say, okay, they've surpassed them. Because the Thunder right now are sitting on their hands. I don't like what they've done. The Mavs, they made a move today, but they're just not as talented a basketball team. Like, maybe this doesn't sink Denver's hopes of winning the West, but it definitely knocks them down a peg. And the standard is Boston. You got to find a way to beat the Boston Celtics. And you look at other teams out west, out east, I should say, they're just continuing to add firepower. And Denver is sitting here and they are unfortunately getting worse. And I just don't think there's any world in which they would look back at that KCP contract 3 years from now and say, we regret that. I think that stability would be so valuable. Just knowing what you're getting night to night. I know that he had a rough playoff run, went cold shooting. He was hurt as well. He's a really good basketball player. And at 31, I don't see him dropping off in the next 3 years. So we'll see what Denver does. I think that they should still absolutely be looking to address the two. I don't think they intend to. It doesn't sound that way. I hope that they bring in Russell Westbrook, who opted in with the Clippers, but there's talks they want to trade him. I think that he would bring value as a bench ball handler, which they need because they let Reggie Jackson go. It's just not the right way to build around an all-time great talent, in my opinion. You put together the starting five that was amazing. And once you have that in place, you have to do everything you can to retain that.
And I don't know if their current GM understands the gravity, right? The guy that put this together was Tim Connolly, now general manager of the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? So I don't know if there's a philosophical difference, but you're exactly right. It's not only that Denver is being complacent during free agency. It seems that they are content. That there's almost a confidence or an arrogance about Denver that they're like, oh, no, we don't have to bring back KCP. And I like some of the young guys, too. Like, you bring up Strother. The stat about Strother that was crazy during the draft process was not only is he a lights-out shooter, great closeout attacker. He was a 99th percentile spot-up player in college. But again, you're asking these guys who are second and third-year guys to just take these massive leaps out of nowhere, that there's no indication that they are ready to do this sort of thing. And my big concern, Carson, you talk about how you don't know if there's any other teams that can definitively leapfrog them, as the number one team out west. That's not even really my concern. It's just the straight up matchups that Denver's going to draw in these playoffs. You're going to have to defend Luka and Kyrie. You're going to have to defend Anthony Edwards. You're going to have to defend Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Who is that guy? And if it's Aaron Gordon, are you big enough around him, where you're losing that in the front court? I don't know, man. The alarm bells are going off for me on Denver, and I think they need to wake up. I think they need to realize the gravity of this free agency period, and they need to make a move. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say it. Russell Westbrook, to me, is not the solution. I am still skeptical. Again, he's
you need a bench ball handler, and I don't think it's Jalen Pickett. He didn't play this past year.
Can we hash this out for a minute? Because you have been one of the biggest Russell Westbrook skeptics for a long time. And we have been waiting for so long for the light bulb moment to go off, right? The eureka, I'm a role player. I need to do my job. Why are you confident that he's going to figure it out? Like, we've seen him in winning situations, and I understand that bench ball handler is a need for Denver. My question to you is, how is this going to be any different from the Russell Westbrook that we have seen over the past couple of years? Why are you confident that he's not going to shoot you in the foot and make boneheaded decisions in playoff games like we have grown accustomed to?
He's not going to be on the floor in any of the most important minutes of the game. I mean, Logan, beggars can't be choosers. And of course, I've been skeptical and critical of Russ, but we're talking about holding him to an entirely different standard. We're talking about him being viewed as a star, him being viewed as one of the best players in the league, MVP. That's when I've been critical of a lot of his shortcomings. When you're talking about him versus Jalen Pickett, like, who is going to be the bench ball handler? It's a massive, massive hole in this roster at this point that needs to be addressed. And also, I do want to be clear. I do think that Russ has changed with the Clippers. I think that he's embraced his athleticism away from the ball as a cutter more. I think that in the postseason, he's embraced the defensive end of the floor more. The biggest problem, and there's no fixing this problem, is that he's still just a brutal shooter of the basketball. And like, it was disgusting in this series this year against the Mavs. Absolutely gross. He was basically unplayable. But when he has the ball in his hands and he's pushing in transition and you get the playmaking value, that's when he'll be at his best. And that's what you need him for. It's not more than 12 minutes a game. It's just, can he be better than Reggie Jackson was? And I think that because of the fact that at least you have the athletic imposition from him instead of Reggie just taking bad shots, taking tough shots, I'll take the athlete. I'll take the playmaker. You don't need much, man. You just need somebody who can be capable. You're not going to find another Bruce Brown. And I want to give Calvin Booth credit because, like, yes, Tim Connolly put most of this roster into place, but it was Calvin Booth who went out, added Bruce Brown. It was Calvin Booth who went out, added KCP. Unfortunately, it's also Calvin Booth who has lost both those guys. And Bruce Brown was different, right? He got paid an exorbitant amount of money to leave. They were never going to be able to pay him that. KCP is the one where it's more frustrating because the number's just totally reasonable that he ends up leaving for. So much of this stuff out west is going to be matchup dependent. We'll see how Denver finishes this offseason. When I think about specifically how they fare against Minnesota, I now think that they are worse off. Absolutely. I think that they struggle to defend more now in that matchup. And Aaron Gordon ended up being probably the best option to guard Ant anyways, but now you're losing an option to guard Ant in KCP. Now you're downsizing, especially if you have to have, well, actually Christian Brown guarded Ant well. So, okay, you can supplement that value, but it's the offensive inconsistency that concerns me there, because if Minnesota is able to double Jokic as aggressively as they did this past year, and you already weren't holding them accountable enough as shooters, yikes. And also, it's, as you say, like, Denver is less dependent on shot variance offensively than anybody else in basketball, which is a good thing because they create such high shot quality in and around the paint with cutting, with Jokic's post-up dominance, with Jamal's touch shot making mid-range game. But you want to have some sort of three-point shooting ceiling, man. Like, when you're already last in attempts and you lose one of your three best by far three-point shooters, that's not good. So they are taking a step back. I thought that this team was clearly co-title favorite this past year with Boston. I picked them to win the title, and I thought at some point, they're going to get another one. Their offensive formula is too reliable. Jokic is too great. This starting five is too well constructed. You put them head-to-head against Boston, it's a really tough matchup for Boston because they don't have anything to do with Jokic. And now it's like, yeah, I just think the Boston talent advantage would be too significant. And that's really disappointing for Denver. You have one of the 15 greatest players to ever play the game of basketball, certainly in terms of peak, in my opinion. You can't let valuable winning guys go. I think that they've been too blasé. I think that they've been too content to let KCP walk from the jump. They've communicated that, and it's disappointing to me. Okay, let's talk about a big move that went down, not actually today, not a free agency move, but a big trade. DeJounte Murray is going to the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Hawks will get in return a 2025 Lakers first, a 2027 pick swap, Larry Nance Jr., and Dyson Daniels. How do you feel about this for New Orleans, Logan?
It's an upgrade, but I don't love the value that New Orleans gave up. I think DeJounte is going to be a better option. At the two guards, you needed somebody who can defend on the perimeter. You need somebody who can handle the rock. It's not a perfect fit. I'm not in love with DeJounte's game. He frustrates me as a shooter. I kind of have an issue with New Orleans giving up Dyson Daniels in 2 firsts. I like Dyson Daniels as a player. Again, maybe it doesn't fit this timeline. Maybe you want to accelerate this, and they definitely improve, but I do like Dyson Daniels as a young prospect, and I don't love them giving up 2 first-round picks. I give them like a C. This is like a C+ move to me, and the only reason I say that is, like, yes, the Pelicans are getting better, because they got a more talented player, but this really doesn't move the needle like at all for me with New Orleans. Like, I think they need like a high-end creator. And it sucks, man. Your options aren't going to be great every offseason. That player just doesn't magically become available every offseason. So I'll give New Orleans props for going and doing something and trying to improve, which I definitely think they did by acquiring DeJounte. This just doesn't really move them into any other tier of team to me. This doesn't make them like a legitimate contender to me. This doesn't, thrust them into a different tier of team. So credit to them for improving. But again, this is just not a major needle mover for me.
Not at all. I don't even think I would give them a C+. And I'm interested in if this means that BI is on the move, because that was initially my thought. Hasn't happened yet. We've heard some rumors. If BI is not on the move, then I really don't like this, because Zion has made it clear he is your building block. He is your foundational piece. And I understand if you have questions about the health, but the value that he has as just one of the most dominant rim pressuring forces we've ever seen just by far surpasses what you're getting from anybody else on this team. And what's the best vision for building around Zion? It's having a couple of awesome 3-and-D wings alongside him. It's having one really skilled lead ball handler who can create high shot quality for the guys around, and who can ideally knock down shots off the catch at a high level as well, take advantage of those Zion kickouts. And then at the 5, you want somebody who can really hold things down as a rim protector defensively, ideally switch and guard in space. Best case scenario, the guy could space the floor as well, so you don't have Zion and a non-shooting big. Maybe you don't need that, though. Okay, maybe we call that the cherry on top. Adding DeJounte just moves them further away from that vision. The vision was, we got to split up CJ and BI. Neither of them are good enough to be our consistent number one from the perimeter. Both of them struggle athletically to create high quality shots. So you end up with these two guys taking a lot of tough jumpers. CJ had a really good season. He upped his 3-point frequency versus mid-range frequency from the previous year. That made him more efficient. But in the playoffs, it's like, yeah, the shot quality from both of them is tough. I would just rather be closing with Herb and Trey Murphy on the floor. Just one of those guys out there. And then a center who is significantly better than Jonas Valanciunas. So now this team that has already been clunky offensively, where it's like the BI Zion fit just doesn't work. You're introducing another guy who needs the ball in his hands, who is a low efficiency scorer, multiple points below league average in terms of true shooting percentage, not elite playmaking guard, not going to solve those issues in terms of excellent decision-making within the offense, somebody who is just going to be making really high-level pick-and-roll reads, right? Taking on that sort of singular responsibility to create for everybody around him. And although DeJounte has improved as a 3-point shooter in terms of both volume and efficiency this past year, that's been a concerted point of focus for him, he's still pretty middling there. And he is certainly not at the level of like a Trey Murphy, right? So if I'm taking Trey Murphy off the floor, who's the better defender, the better shooter, to add another guy when I'm not getting additive ball handling value and shot making value because I already have dudes who are like mediocre stars in that regard, like, what am I doing? If your plan isn't to trade BI, then this is just more time with the ball in the hands of these meh stars, who we call stars because of their raw production, but they're not necessarily more impactful than an awesome 3-and-D guy, and less time with those dudes on the floor. And maybe the outlook on that changes a bit if DeJounte is just like awesome defensively, right? If he gets back to the level he was at in his role-playing Spurs days. I don't know though, man. He's been regressed there for several years, and I think that as he remains in a high volume role offensively, it's not going to be like the point of emphasis for him. I don't know that it's going to be a major point of pride. I think that he could bounce back a bit from where he was in Atlanta, partly just by being in a better situation defensively, but I don't think that he's going to be like the kind of guy who you want as your number one point of attack defender, taking these awesome wings off the floor. So I just don't think this solves their issues. In fact, I think it actually takes them further away from the ideal build around Zion. It's clunky. It's weird. I don't like it very much.
I agree. And to add some numbers that you're talking about with the jumpers, like he shot 37% on jump shots last season. He shot 32% on pull-up threes. He shot 20% on step-back threes. Like, he's not an elite floor spacer. In a lot of ways, Carson, I think they traded for the wrong Hawks guard. Look, man, if you're going to go and swing, like, I don't know. I'm going to pull all my resources, everything that I can, and I'm going to throw the kitchen sink in Atlanta to try to get Trae Young because I think that works. That addresses your biggest need to me. Like, if it involves me giving up Brandon Ingram and Daniels and picks, I'm okay with that. Like, I think Trae and Zion would just be an overwhelming
that'd be an
offensive duo.
amazing foundation.
And you're talking about the 3-and-D wings. Herb Jones and Trey Murphy complement and do exactly what you need them on the backside for Zion and Trey. I just think that is the ideal fit. And I am under the inclination that Atlanta is going to move off of a lot of their win now assets like Trey. They already moved off DeJounte. If Trey's next, I just feel like New Orleans whiffed and they missed out, man, on the sweepstakes. If that's what comes next, I think we're going to look back at this deal and go, why didn't you guys try to go even more all in and go and get the better asset? That's how I feel. I just feel like they traded for the wrong guard, the wrong Atlanta Hawks guard.
Yeah, dude. And I think that what we were hearing about like DeJounte being viewed as the more valuable asset by some league front offices, I think that was horseshit, dude. I mean, this haul, are you kidding me? Trey would never get moved for this haul. So thank God NBA GMs actually do understand who the way better guard in that backcourt is. It is Trae Young, because the offensive foundation you would have would be insane. So I don't know if Trey's available. If he's not, then I pray for him, man, because he is in such a shitty situation. The Hawks just won 36 games. They traded, flawed as he may be. I mean, I love Jalen Johnson. I couldn't say that Jalen Johnson was their second best player last year. I would still say that that's DeJounte. Okay, so you traded clearly one of your three best players, and you got really minimal win now assets in return. So you're only going to be worse. I guess you could be a little bit healthier, but like the Hawks are far, far away, man. And I get it. Trey's pretty young. He's going to be 26 at the start of the season, though. And like your foundational pieces are multiple years younger than that. It's Jalen Johnson. It's Reese Shea. I would just so much rather see him in a situation where he can contribute to like a legitimately awesome offense, pair him with some dynamic front court play finisher who like wants that sort of spoon-fed playmaking that Trey provides. Again, we're dipping into the theoreticals here, but I'm with you, dude. And New Orleans has the draft capital to dish out, dude. They have lots and lots of draft capital. And you give up BI to make the contracts match up, to give Atlanta something back, right? At least a star player who's reasonably young. I don't know if there was something to work with there. But DeJounte, to me, he is not the guy. Okay. But Logan, when I mentioned Trey, I mentioned getting Trey on the move. The option that I always salivate over is him going to San Antonio and playing with Wemby. The Spurs have gone another direction for now, though, and they have signed the point god, CP Triz himself, on a 1-year, $11 million deal. How do you like Chris Paul going to San Antonio?
I like it. I mean, you get somebody competent to run the offense. Like, Chris Paul obviously has fallen a very far way from where he was even back in the Suns title run. He's just way more significantly limited athletically as a shot maker in terms of creating separation and creating actual advantages. But, oh my God, dude, the Spurs offense last season was, hey, Wemby, just go out there and figure it out, man. We're just going to, and in a lot of ways, it was like, we're going to make life harder on you. We're going to run Jeremy Sohan at the point. And this is a guy that is just going to make great decisions. He's going to be a great pick and roll partner with Wemby. He's going to spoon. You talk about spoon feeding guys easy looks. Chris Paul is one of the greatest passers of all time. Like, in terms of overall outlook for the San Antonio Spurs, I still don't think they're a playoff team in the West, but it gives the Spurs a older mentor who can come in here and help these young guys come along their ways in terms of development. He can lead this locker room. He can be a real leader for this team. I like that aspect culturally, how he fits in with the locker room and the young guys. And on the court, it gives Wemby a competent ball handler who is going to make crisp, good decisions and set him up for easy looks. Like, Chris Paul may not be the pick and roll partner he once was. He's still a good pick and roll partner with Wemby. And I think it's going to make the San Antonio Spurs a little more watchable next season. And it's going to give Wemby somebody that he can actually trust with the ball in their hands offensively. And it's not bad value, $11 million. I like this deal. I like this deal for San Antonio.
Yeah, I thought that maybe they would have had to overpay a little bit more. I thought maybe they would have had to attach a second year on there. CP3, dude, he's being hella chill. I mean, he let the Warriors postpone the date at which his contract became guaranteed. He had no incentive to do that. He just gave up $30 million and said, no, it's fine. You guys want to try to dangle me and sign in trades? That's good. So he lost $20 million taking this deal. And it's reasonable. I think that it's great for San Antonio. There's no downside to this. I do think that they are in a spot where you want to be proactive building around Wemby. I think Wemby's that exceptional. I think Wemby is already one of the easily 20 best basketball players on the planet. He's knocking on the door of top 15. The guy's insane. And with the progression rate that he is at, there's no reason to believe that he will not be a top 10 player by the end of next year. Like, the top 10 is really loaded, but I don't know, man. It is insane the player that he was in November compared to the player that he was at the end of the regular season. And when you just think about what the most capable version of the Spurs was last year, when Trey Jones and Wemby played together, you had 1,300 minutes, huge sample size. They had a plus 4.3 net rating. They were a legitimately good basketball team just when you put them on the floor with an actual point guard. And who is CP3? He's juiced up Trey Jones at this point, right? Those are two guys who aren't super comfortable shooting from beyond the arc. They're limited athletes, right? They're smaller guards, but what can they do? They make phenomenal decisions. They take phenomenal care of the basketball. They hit you in your spots. They control the game. Obviously, CP3 is better than Trey Jones, but at this stage in his career, like, that's the archetype, and he's an upgraded version of it. And Wemby, as remarkable as his skill set is, isolating, ball handling, creating from the perimeter, is always at his best to me when you're using him as a screener. His most efficient play type this past year was as a pick and roll man. He's a freak in transition as well. There's a lot of stuff he does that's absolutely freakish. But when you use him as a screener and he's either popping or he's rolling and he is like the single most massive target around the rim, and you can manufacture looks for him as an accurate lob passer, as a good decision maker, that's where he's going to thrive. That's where he's going to be set up to succeed. And CP3 is a short-term solution in that mold. And as you mentioned, culture building, right? Teaching these guys how to win, maybe mentoring Stephon Castle. Like, I only see positives for this with the Spurs. There's no downside. Money is of no import to them. They don't have to rush things. It doesn't have to be this year that you immediately take the leap around Wemby. I like it. Okay, Logan, this is not a signing, but it is a significant rumor, and it's an interesting one to discuss. Chris Haynes reported that the Bulls offered the Warriors, speaking of Chris Paul, Zach LaVine in exchange for CP3 and Andrew Wiggins. And the Warriors said no to that. They decided instead to waive Chris Paul, obviously, and allow him to go sign with the Spurs. Do you think that that was a mistake by the Dubs?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think it's a massive misstep by the Warriors. The biggest thing to me is that in this hypothetical trade, you wouldn't have to give up Jonathan Kuminga. In a lot of ways, you are giving up two negative assets. Chris Paul on that kind of money, nobody wants. Andrew Wiggins on that kind of money, nobody wants. And Carson, oh my gosh, dude, how many times have I mentioned through free agency and all this stuff we've talked about that the one idiotic front office that you could do a deal with is Chicago. Chicago's the dumbest front office in basketball. Of course they would offer this deal to Golden State. I don't see any upside for what they were trying to do. And
yeah.
You can be disappointed with what Zach LaVine gave you last season. He only played 25 games. He got injured. The Bulls were significantly better with him off the floor when they had Kobe White take over. That's that. LaVine is still a damn good basketball player that gives you exactly what you need. Again, man, Wiggins to me is a zero with how much money he is making. Chris Paul as an asset is a zero with how much money he was making. And I don't love Zach LaVine's contract either, right? You're going to be paying this guy 40 plus mil. What have we harped on, Carson, over the last couple episodes of what the Warriors need to do? Capitalize on the window that you have now. And so effectively, you would be giving up two negative assets for a player that fits exactly what you need. Another ball handler, another scorer who can create advantages for himself and score in isolation. A guy that can complement Steph Curry off ball and shoot the pill. Zach LaVine is not a miracle worker. He is not he's not going to fix all of the Warriors' issues. I don't really know if there's any player that you could immediately plug into Golden State and I go, wow, this is it. All of their issues are solved. It's about fixing them one at a time. And Zach LaVine is a very valuable archetype that you need right now. You desperately need another number 2 scorer alongside Steph that can just help alleviate the pressure off of his shoulders. And so what have you done now? You've apparently just let an asset walk that somebody was interested in. And you haven't solved that issue at all. I don't know what the Warriors are doing, Carson. If LaVine was on the table, I just think that is a massive, massive misstep. I don't think Zach LaVine is a cure-all. I don't think he is the perfect asset. I don't think he makes the Warriors a legit contender, the likes of Denver or Oklahoma City. But he addresses a need, and you weren't going to give up that much value to go and get the guy. If this report is true, this might be the biggest gaffe of this offseason thus far, man. I don't know how you don't jump all over that trade.
Yeah, obviously plan A for the Dubs had to be Paul George, right? Like that'd be a perfect fit offensively. He would immediately bring plus value defensively. He's a way better player than a Zach LaVine. But once the sign and trade talks fell through there, you have to take what you can get. And at this point, as I've said innumerable times, you're doing a disservice to Steph Curry if you aren't trying to put a winning basketball team around him. I think people are too low on LaVine right now, and that's somebody who historically not the biggest Zach LaVine guy, right? Because this is sort of the trend with these things. Dudes come out, they put up big numbers, and if they play a style where the highlights are as electric as they are with Zach LaVine, people say, whoa, 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 that guy's really good. Then they say, hold on a second. Is that guy a very good playmaker? Is that guy a very good defender? Why isn't his team winning? Why isn't his team better with him on the floor? That guy actually sucks. I don't want anything to do with that guy. And the truth tends to be somewhere in the middle. Zach LaVine is still just 29 years old. He is still one of the most gifted athletes in the NBA. He is still one of the best pure shooters in the NBA. And am I optimistic about teaching a pretty old dog new tricks, saying, okay, Zach, we need you to consistently engage defensively. We need you to embrace a new offensive system, be extremely active moving without the ball. I mean, he's an amazing movement shooter. We've seen stretches where like he's using his athleticism as a cutter as well, but it would require him reframing his basketball mindset and really committing, going all in on doing what he can to contribute to winning. Like maybe that doesn't work out. But what the hell is Andrew Wiggins at this point, man? You're not getting 2022 Andrew Wiggins back. There were many, many stretches of this past season where it was difficult to watch Andrew Wiggins. He was so inconsistent as a shooter. He was not the defender that he was a couple years ago. Just overall, as a contributor, like really did not move the needle. LaVine provides a level of offensive punch that is essential, right? You cannot keep running back these lineups that are Steph, 2 non-shooters, potentially 3 non-shooters if you're talking about Kuminga, Draymond, and a big. And now you're letting Klay walk too, which is good. You don't want to overpay Klay. I get it. You have to replace him with something though, man. Like there's a lot of negatives with Klay Thompson in the Warriors situation specifically, where he feels empowered, emboldened to be like the number 2 option. I'd be more confident about him going somewhere else with reset expectations. In Denver, I'm the 4th option. In LA, with the Lakers, I'm a mid-level exception guy. He gets that. With the Warriors, he doesn't get that. He still thinks I'm Klay Thompson. I'm the splash brother. I can shoot whatever the hell I want. That's frustrating. And when he's an average defender, it's additionally frustrating. But by God, man, at least he can make shots. Like you're just going to let him walk and you're not going to get anything back. And LaVine obviously would be a significantly better second option than Klay. He is an actual second option. And so then you still have your issues, right? Okay, you still don't have a lot of offensive skill around those guys. You still are lacking in ball handling, and especially losing CP, you're lacking ball handling off the bench. You are still lacking in size. There's a lot of things you would need to figure out, but you'd be better. And as much as anything, dude, what is running it back going to do for you? You know what you are as a basketball team. You know all your limitations. You know exactly what the ceiling is. Why would you ever be content with that? And Zach LaVine's contract, it's not good. I wouldn't want to take it on, right? I wouldn't want to be paying him $45 million 3 years from now. But if you want to have Steph Curry 3 years from now, then you might as well, dude. Because it's like, when is the perfect option coming down the line? When is the option where it's like, oh, yes, we have the assets. You have multiple bad contracts on the books, not as much anymore with CP3 off the books, but like Wiggins, it's not egregious, but I don't really know who wants to take him on even at like $25+ million a year. When's the perfect option coming? It's not. And I would have taken Zach LaVine because of that.
Well, Carson, at this point, like, can we question if the Warriors even want to be legitimately competitive? Like,
Yes.
there has been they have waited so long to make something happen that it's like, do you guys even care about the last years of Steph and Dre? Are you guys just waiting until they're gone? And then it's like, okay, now it's rebuild time. Well, we just wasted 3 to 4 years of Steph and Dre. And again, man, like we have said time and time again, if that is what you were waiting on to just go into full rebuild mode, then freaking trade Steph and trade Dre and get it done with, man. Like, it's disheartening to me watching them waste one of the greatest point guards and one of the greatest players of all time and one of the greatest defenders to ever play this game. And you are wasting good years of these guys, letting them go to waste. It's beyond frustrating. And again, Carson, I just question if this team actually wants to be competitive and win another title.
Yeah.
Or even make an attempt.
Well, yeah, they're not going to win another title. And I don't want to present it as if that's in the cards. I don't think that was in the cards with PG. I damn sure don't think it's in the cards with Zach LaVine. But it's unfair to Steph Curry to be conceding, to be trying to save money on the margins. You're not even thinking about future assets here, right? Andrew Wiggins is not a future asset. You could have just objectively gotten a significantly better basketball player who you would have to pay a little bit more. And by the way, you'd be clearing some things up getting rid of Wiggins, because like the front court with Kuminga and Dre and Wiggins all in there, it's weird. It's too weird at this point. Adding a dynamic offensive two would be one of the best things that you could do. And you can just look at the last several years of asset management from the Warriors, and you have disaster after disaster after disaster, man. I mean, God bless them for winning the title in 2022. God bless Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole for being by far the best versions of themselves we've ever seen. But guess what that led to? Poole overpaid. Wiggins overpaid. Poole then traded at all-time low value for Chris Paul, who a year later you waive. Andrew Wiggins, you try to get anybody to take on, you can't. And more than anything, it's the two timelines notion. I'm not going to go through the whole spiel again, but if you had packaged the picks that were Wiseman, Kuminga, Moody for a Pascal Siakam, for a Bradley Beal at that time when he was still like a real star level basketball player, for an OG Anunoby, not even all those picks necessarily, you'd be in a significantly better position at this point. You would have been not the title front runner the past couple of years, but a legitimately good playoff team. People focus in on Wiseman and they say, what a bad pick. What a terrible pick. That cost them. Obviously, yeah, terrible pick. But they never should have been picking in the first place. They should have dealt him for a win now asset. The notion that you're going to draft multiple times in the lottery over 2 years while your best player in franchise history is in his 30s and your second and third most important players are in their 30s, and you're not just going to draft those guys. You're going to draft projects. Wiseman was a project. Kuminga was a project. It'll blow my mind until the day that I die. So that's how you squander the late prime of an all-time great basketball player. The Warriors aren't going to suck. Well, I don't know. Maybe they will kind of suck if they don't replenish losing. Klay's not even that good, dude. Like, I mean, the stuff that we're talking about at this point around Steph, it's just unfair to him. They'll be a mediocre to above average basketball team. But you know who's better than that, Logan, is the Oklahoma City Thunder, who in a lot of ways are sort of in pole position to emerge as the front runner out west, with Denver potentially regressing a little bit, losing KCP. And interestingly, they haven't been active on the market, but they declined the team options for both Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins. They could have had both those guys for another year at like $2 million a pop. They declined that extra year at really cheap value, and they're hoping to extend both of those players. What do you think about OKC taking that approach and potentially limiting their ability to sign additional players this offseason?
I think it's kind of a dumb gamble. And the reason I say this is, again, you talk about the money. That is invaluable. That extra year, that is so crucial with these young guys. The fact that you can pay them pennies on the dollar for their actual value. These are guys that provide elite shooting on the wings. Wiggins also provides an element defensively that Joe doesn't have, but they both are elite shooters. And so I understand the idea of trying to re-sign them on a value contract that is going to benefit you in 3 to 4 years, right? If you can re-sign them now at I don't know, maybe like $10 to $15 million in 3 to 4 years, those contracts are going to be great. But to me, it's just not worth it letting them go on the open market and potentially going to other teams that, I mean, these are really valuable guys, right? Shooting is at an all-time valuable high. I assume that teams that just need shooting would throw bags at these guys. And also, the other aspect of this is, one, like you said, you can go and re-sign another. You can go sign another guy on a bigger contract because they'd be making less money. The worst problem to me, Carson, is that these would be really valuable trade assets, just period. If you took their team options and paid them cheaply, one, you have them under control for this next year, which allows you to dangle them in front of teams and go, hey, we can't pay Aaron Wiggins. We have too many young guys that we need to pay. What are you going to give them for me? Are you going to give me a first? Are you going to give me a guy who's on a contract already? Same goes for Isaiah Joe. Hey, this is a valuable asset right now. We can't pay him. What do you guys want to give me for him? And you have a long-term guy for the next 3 to 4 years. I don't really understand this, Carson. I would have accepted the team options, and I would have probably explored trading one or the other. To me, it's just not worth the gamble that you could lose these guys for nothing. And the fact that you're just going to have to pay them more money this next season, I would have just have accepted the team deal. That to me seems like the no-brainer.
Yeah, I agree. And these are two really good role players. I wouldn't say that Wiggins is an elite shooter. The percentage would say that. I think his willingness to take them, like, he's not a really high volume shooter, but he's a good shooter. He's an awesome all-around role player. The athleticism, the closeout attacking, the defense. I love me some Aaron Wiggins, but it's just counterintuitive to me because you could have had another year with really good basketball players on dirt cheap contracts. And Calvin Booth talks about great teams need to find a way to replace the fourth guy, the fifth guy, referring to letting KCP walk. In that situation, I don't agree. But what's really true is the guys you need to be willing to let walk are your sixth guy, your seventh guy. And as much as you like Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins, they're like diamonds in the rough. They're great value finds. They're sort of the cherry on top. And you do need to be willing to accept that, okay, we're not going to be able to keep these guys forever. Like, maybe they can get that team-friendly deal. I don't know. If you are paying these guys like $10 million a year, you get them for 3 years on that. Hey, that would be fantastic. I don't think they're going to get them for that cheap, though. And even then, like, I'd probably just be trying to get Wiggins. I would probably just be trying to get one of the two to maintain the utmost flexibility. And it's not going to inhibit them from like signing Isaiah Hartenstein this year. Even if they pay both of these guys $10 million, they'd still have like damn near $30 million in cap. I mean, they just have an absurd amount of flexibility. But in terms of long-term flexibility, in terms of the potential to get like both a Hartenstein and if they were to trade for a Lauri Markkanen, whatever, it does to some extent limit your course of actions. I don't think it's disastrous from OKC, but these are the sort of dudes who you have to be prepared to replace. And leaning in to this identity, leaning into what worked and got you the 1 seed, I can understand, but you have to look at why it is so effective, and then you have to be willing to understand your shortcomings. The biggest shortcoming being the lack of a legitimate 4 alongside Chet Holmgren, who can bring physicality, who can hold down the defensive glass. They want to bring in Isaiah Hartenstein. Seems that's where their eyes are. That's good with me because you have to do something, but the ideal outcome would have been a Denny Avdia. The ideal outcome would be prying Lauri Markkanen away from the Jazz, which I do think they have the assets to do, even though Utah apparently doesn't want to trade him. And so I just don't love the way that they've approached this offseason, sort of start to finish. And the draft, I like getting Topic because I love Topic, but I don't think that he was at the biggest position of need. Yes, they want more offensive skill and playmaking because that let them down around SGA. But again, they didn't look at that bigger forward spot. Then they draft Dylan Jones. They trade a bunch of seconds to get Dylan Jones, which I think is a reach. And again, is not going to fill that specific need. He can rebound really well positionally. He's big. He's thick as hell. He's 240, but he's 6'5", and he's another ball handler playmaker. I just don't love it, man. It feels to me like they are maybe a bit too confident in this got us to the 1 seed. We don't need to address this going forward, when it's like, yeah, you're really, really good. You're in a position to like maybe be a dynasty, right? I mean, you not only have great players who are extremely young and you have a bunch of them and you have a bunch of cap, You have a bunch of assets. You have a bunch of draft capital you can trade. Like, there's no reason for you to not emerge, even if it's not this year, a year from now, as like the front runner in the entire league. And I just haven't really understood their approach to this offseason so far. So again, it's like you kind of look around and who's winning? The Boston Celtics are winning, man, because every team that's in position to catch up isn't doing so at this moment.
Yeah, and it, one, I just don't understand with all of these resources, the abundance of resources that you have. It just makes sense to go push your chips in on the table and make that move right now, man. Just go ahead and do it. Also, not they draft Topic, who Topic isn't going to play this year. Topic tore his ACL. He's going to miss the entire season. So he doesn't even help you like immediately. And again, it's not that I hate the pick, but like I love the idea of getting like a Tristan da Silva, or like you said, man, moving that 12th pick and getting Denny. I'm always just for teams trying to make the best win now moves. And I think there were a lot of moves on the table and are still on the table for Oklahoma City. I just don't think they've maximized their resources to this point. But there's definitely, it seems like an extreme lack of urgency from Oklahoma City.
Look, if you re-sign these guys on good value contracts, you maintain control of them for a couple more years, you maintain the ability to trade them down the line. I get it. I'm just waiting to see, okay, what is the dollar value? Because if it is 15, I don't think you can be paying both these guys. And I'm not sure that I'd be paying one of them. Like this year, man, you could win the title this year if you played your cards right. Lowry's the one that I'm always going to look at. Hartenstein is good. It's not nearly as good as Lauri Markkanen. So we'll see what OKC does. Obviously, they're going to be awesome next year, no matter what. But it's a question of how meaningful is that improvement. And as much as we can like both Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins in the playoffs, ultimately, they both let you down. They both struggled as shot makers. You could roam off of especially Wiggins. They certainly weren't making a difference in the series that you needed to win.
This just broke. Kelly Oubre signed a 2-year, $16.3 million deal to re-up with the 76ers.
Ooh, I like that. I like that, man. What was the dollar value per year again?
Dude, like $8 million a year, 16.3 over 2 years.
Boy,
that's great value.
Good deal. That's a good deal, man. I thought that Kelly had a really good season, pretty much start to finish. And you can have some frustrations with his consistency as a spot up shooter, but like you're getting a really good athlete and you're getting a really awesome point of attack defender. You just think about the fits that he gave Jalen Brunson, man. That sort of length and athleticism and agility. Like, what does he have? 7'3" wingspan at 6'7", and he can take on any guard. He's that quick. He guards that well in space. I love it. I love it.
I think it's a great pickup too. And I mean, there's just versatility, right? If you want to play him alongside, PG and Maxey, if you want to bring him off the bench, he just does a lot of things at a high level, man. That kind of athlete that it's that multifaceted is just a really valuable archetype. And you hit on it, dude. The commitment that we saw Oubre on the defensive end was phenomenal. I'm actually stunned that like what he got over the 2 years, I thought was what Oubre was going to command like per year. I thought he was looking at 15 mil a year. This is insane value for Philadelphia, man. They crushed this one.
8's really good value, dude. And we talk about how Philly clearly lacked a third offensive option, and that was a big issue. The dude who most consistently stepped up for them was Kelly Oubre. I mean, Kelly Oubre is the guy who gives you 13 a night, who actually did shoot well from deep in that playoff series against the Knicks. He's not going to be super consistent there, but now the burden on him is just diminished a little bit further. I like what Philly's doing, man. I like what Philly's doing a lot. I still think that they're sitting at 3 in the East for me, but the gap between them and the Knicks, I mean, that's close, dude, because now you have 2 really good wing defenders as a tandem on top of your overwhelming scoring center, on top of your awesome perimeter scoring guard. Oubre shooting isn't super consistent, but PG is fantastic there. They're putting together a lot of very intuitive pieces. And if Eric Gordon's coming off the bench, then he's pretty damn good coming off the bench. Drummond, they've improved at backup center. I like what they're doing, man. I do like what they're doing. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. On the other half, we've got several more signings to talk about after we get you all some quick words from the lovely people. Actually, it's us speaking to the merits of the lovely people over at DraftKings. Get ready for a night full of big fights and big action. It's UFC 303, and it can be even bigger. Jump in on all the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC.
It's super easy for first timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a fighter to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your fighter, and place your first bet. It's that simple. The light heavyweight title is on the line in the main event, but there are so many more amazing matchups happening in Vegas.
And speaking of amazing, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Get that big fight feel only on DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. So, Logan, when we look at some of these small, mid-sized wing contracts, we just talked about Kelly Oubre's $8 million a year for 2 years. We have another one with Najee Marshall signing with the Dallas Mavericks for 3 years, 27. Interrelated with this, Derrick Jones Jr. goes to the Clippers on a 3-year, $30 million deal. Let's start with the Marshall signing for Dallas, though, and specifically sort of making that swap when you're talking about pretty similar dollar value between those two options. How do you feel this helps them or changes things for them next year?
Najee Marshall's a good wing. He was kind of buried in the depth chart. He didn't get a ton of PT like in the playoffs just because he's behind some really great wings and Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. He's a good defender. He's a good shooter. You know, he's got a little bit of playmaking chops. Like, I like Najee Marshall. I think it's a good pickup. I probably would have preferred Derrick Jones Jr. just because of the vertical spacing aspect that he brings, how great he was defensively, and just how well he complements Luka. I think he'll work in Los Angeles just because Derrick Jones Jr. is a good wing. You know, I think he'll be a good lob threat there too. He'll be great defensively, but specifically, it's just such a luxury of playing alongside guys like Luka and Kyrie. Like, that was the best version of Derrick Jones Jr. we're likely ever going to see. That's what I want to emphasize, is like, that is the most optimized offensive situation for Derrick Jones Jr. across the league. So he'll probably take a step back a little bit in LA. He probably won't be as great as he was in Dallas. He's still a good wing, but this is a good value signing. $9 million a year is good value for Najee Marshall, and he's a good wing. Again, you're eliminating the vertical spacing element that you had with Derrick Jones Jr., but you're keeping the defense, and now you're getting a little bit of floor spacing. So I probably would have preferred them keeping DJJ, but Najee Marshall's a solid wing.
I think I would have preferred them keeping Derrick Jones Jr. as well, but you also make a great point, Logan. That is the best that he's ever going to look. I mean, you are never going to have a higher shot quality manufactured for you. You're not going to walk into the skip passing of Luka Doncic. You're not going to walk into a situation like that OKC series where it's like, oh, you're blitzing both of our lead ball handlers every time they touch the ball. Like, wow, I'm going to get a lot of wide open corner threes off of that. That is a pretty special level of luxury. And obviously, when you take away that sort of spoon-fed offense, Derrick Jones Jr. is much more prone to struggling. And he is certainly a more questionable shooter than Najee Marshall. Now, Najee Marshall had a dramatically improved season. He was pretty darn good as a spot-up player this past year. But over the course of his career, he hasn't been a very and the sample size just isn't that large. So I do think the improvement is real, but we'll kind of see to what extent. But I do think he's a more willing shooter. That's part of the problem with Derrick Jones Jr. When you can roam off of him and he's not even shooting, you just saw how brutal it was in the Celtics final series. Like when KP was on the floor in those minutes and they were able to just have him play drop where he is guarding Derrick Jones Jr. He's assigned to him, but he's not actually guarding him. He's leaving him for these above the break threes, and he just can't punish you. I get the frustration with that. Now, I do think there's a lot of little things he does that are awesome. I think his offensive rebounding was pretty darn impressive. I think his athleticism, what that meant as a cutter, as you mentioned, in transition, using him as a screener when Kyrie and Luka were getting blitzed, what he could do as a short roller, and then being as awesome as he was defensively, the level that he was at as a shot blocking guard, again, his length and athleticism coming into play there, or shot blocking wing. I do think he's probably a slightly better all-around player than Najee Marshall, but Najee Marshall does bring you a guy you're more confident in as a shooter and an awesome defender. And defensively, you get even a little bit more versatility with Najee because he's bigger, because he's stronger, and he also moves really well. Like, you can put him on quick guards. I was rewatching some of his defensive possessions. Like, you're putting him on De'Aaron Fox and he's holding up well there. You're putting him on a shifty guard like SGA. He's holding up really well there. 6'7", 7'1" wingspan. He was a 95th percentile isolation defender this past year. So I'm good with it. I think it's a good move for Dallas. I mean, I guess it's mostly a lateral move. If Derrick Jones Jr. wanted to leave you for whatever reason, then okay, you found a good replacement. And I do think there's a ceiling there where it's like Najee doesn't have the same athleticism to unlock, but his shot quality is never going to be higher. Like, role players tend to look better alongside Luka Doncic almost always. And I think it's very possible that that's going to be the case for Najee. And if you look at the level that Derrick Jones Jr. was at last year in a Luka Doncic-less world, versus the level that Najee Marshall was at this year in his Luka-less world, Najee has produced more in those Luka-less circumstances. For the Clippers, though, Logan, how do you like them adding DJJ?
Good wing. It's a good ad for them. I mean, he'll have some of the vertical spacing elements for him. It's not going to be as easy alongside Luka, but Harden's a great passer as well. He's just going to look slightly worse. Like, that's just kind of my take with Derrick Jones. He's just going to look like probably 80% of what he looked like in Dallas. His shots are going to be a little tougher. But this addresses a need for the Clippers, right? This is kind of a smaller team, a lot of shooting, right? They can go to the small ball looks. Derrick Jones Jr. is a little bigger, one of the better athletes on this roster. He brings you some size that you didn't have. It's a good signing. I mean, and especially with the level that he reached defensively, that's something that's not going to go away. It's a good ad at a position of need, especially after LA basically completely depleted their wing rotation, in making the James Harden deal happen. They give away Rocco, they give away Nick Batum. That's been a pretty big weak spot for them. So it's an ad at a major position of need for LA.
Yeah, I like it in a vacuum. I don't like it so much when you lost PG. And I do worry about the inconsistency that you get from him as a shooter, because like, that's been such a staple of LA's strength as a basketball team, having really good spot up shooters alongside their guys. And Terrence Mann already is kind of like stretching that a little bit, right? Like, he is not the most dynamic, consistent, confident, willing 3-point shooter. And so adding another guy into the fold with a limitation there, it's not absolutely perfect. It's not seamless, but I think this is good value for Derrick Jones Jr. I honestly think it's good value for all of these guys. All three of these dudes who we just talked about getting signed in that $8 to $10 million range. I think that those are all pretty team-friendly deals. Now, Logan, who didn't want to take a team-friendly deal is Klay Thompson. He said, screw you, Golden State Warriors. I don't care about everything that we've done since 2011. You're not giving me enough Skrilla. You're not giving me enough of that good, cold, hard cash, that green. And maybe that's what he wants. But again, now we're hearing about him potentially taking the mid-level exception to go to the Lakers. Where do you think Klay ends up?
LA's interesting. I heard a report earlier today. LeBron called Klay. So I don't know, maybe the LeBron effect will bring Klay to the Lakers. LeBron has also reportedly said that he's willing to take a pay cut if that means they can go and acquire some of the bigger name free agents on the market. I like Klay in Dallas. Again, we're talking about wings alongside Luka and Kyrie. You're getting an elite shooter of the basketball whose shot quality would arguably, be the highest of his career. Steph's got gravity. Steph generates a lot of easy looks for Klay, but over the past couple of years, it's been really difficult. It would just add a dimension to Dallas's offense that would make them so, so dangerous. If you help off of these guys because you need to slow down Luka and Kyrie, well, hey, guess what? We got one of the greatest shooters of all time sitting wide open. Or it opens up the other element, which is we can't help off of these guys, which is going to open up more isolations for Luka and Kyrie to attack in. I just think it would be a win for both sides. I'm surprised he turned down that money. I would not be chomping at the bit to throw $20 to $25 million at this version of Klay Thompson. I'm surprised he turned down that money from Golden State. $20 million is probably the max that I would be willing to give Klay. And I think Dallas is equipped to do that. So I would predict Dallas I can see him taking a pay cut in LA. I think Dallas just makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I think Dallas makes more sense as well. Denver remains my favorite basketball fit for him. I just think offensively, Denver is a situation where spot up shooters and specifically movement shooters like Klay are just set up to thrive, man, because they're running actions, right? They're constantly incentivizing that sort of movement away from the ball. Dallas is a much more stagnant situation, and Klay is awesome as a pure spot up shooter, right? And there's spacing value just having him parked in the corner. But I do think that he's at his best when he is involved, actively moving, like we're talking about. And also, it's like in Denver, there would be, I think, an even clearer hierarchy where it's like, okay, you're not to overexert yourself in this situation, overassert yourself. Whereas in Dallas, it's like, well, he's obviously going to be the number 3 option offensively there. I don't know if you just get some of the more frustrating Klay tendencies in terms of shot selection, if he's the most intuitive fit. But obviously the pure shooting is valuable. Also, I do worry about the defense there because, like, who's taking on those point of attack assignments now? Unless you're bringing him off the bench. Maybe you're bringing him off the bench. Maybe you're starting Najee Marshall over him. But like, Klay's not the guy to do that. Klay's not the guy to be your number 1 perimeter defender at this point. Obviously, nor is Kyrie or Luka. They both have their limitations there. Still, I do think that is a spot that overall makes sense. The Lakers, just like, I don't know, man. I think that he'd do pretty darn well offensively there. And you could pair him with either D'Lo or Reeves in that backcourt. And then you have sort of your more pick and roll creating guard and your awesome off ball guard. I think that LeBron would create a phenomenal shot quality for Klay. That's not bad, but I do think he would be able to sell himself on a more significant role in Dallas, and he'd be able to get paid more going to Dallas. So it's going to have to be a sign and trade if it's to Dallas. It's going to have to be a sign and trade if it's to Denver, but I don't think you're giving up a lot to get Klay, man. I mean, I think you're pretty much giving up matching contracts and like a first, maybe. I don't know. If you're Dallas, it's like Maxi Kleba and whoever else it takes to get in there and a first. Klay's just not that valuable at this stage in his career. And that would help Dallas. It would. You would have to figure out the exact configuration of which lineups you're getting the best balance of defense and offense. But like, what was their problem in the finals, Logan? None of their supporting cast players could knock down an open 3. None of them could knock down an above the break 3. Klay Thompson is not going to have that problem. Okay. Jonas Valanciunas, Logan. We've all been waiting. Where is Jonas Valanciunas, the Lithuanian legend, going to go? It ends up being the Washington Wizards that sign him. The luckiest guys, the Washington Wizards. 3 years, $30 million. How do you like this? Yeah.
Kind of weird. Kind of weird, man. I mean, gives you a little bit of versatility, I guess, if you want to run some big body lineups. Kind of the same thing with Chris Paul, too. I like his veteran presence here just because the Wizards are such a young, directionless franchise. I have liked what the Wizards have done this offseason. Their 3 picks, Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bub Carrington, I think can all be complimentary to them. I've liked what the Wizards have done. This one just puzzled me. Like, I don't really know. I don't know. Like, do you start him? Do you bring him off the bench?
Somebody's got to pay him. And I mean,
that's true.
The value's not bad, dude. Congrats to the Pelicans. You're free of the Valanciunas prison that you were in. I think you hit on it. This just allows you to get some looks with Sarr at the 4 early in his career, where he's still got to add some size. You want him to improve a bit as a rebounder. Just buys him a little time for that physical maturity, like we've seen with an Evan Mobley. I do think that Sarr's frame is much more indicative of the potential to continue to add size. I also think that he's already bigger than Mobley was, but he's still not necessarily the most physically mature 5. Gives you the option. Long-term, I do think he's a 5, and this isn't some overpay. There's not a ton more that we need to say about Jonas Valanciunas to the Wizards. Okay, we do have some contract extensions today, Logan, that we can run through quickly. One of them we already hinted at. James Harden goes back to the Clippers for 2 years, $70 million. How do you feel about this for LA?
LA doesn't have an option. You had to bring Harden back. The capital that you gave up, your timeline. Yeah, I mean, You had to bring Harden back. It just sucks that you lose PG now, man, because it's like now Harden, instead of being able to play the 3, is now going to be your de facto number 2. Not great. Not great. But again, it's not like the Clippers had many options. What are you going to do, man? Let PG and Harden walk?
Yeah.
Options weren't great. You had to re-sign Harden.
Yeah, and this is a short-term deal. This is a totally reasonable per-year value. Like, letting PG walk was the mistake to me, because at that point, it's like, what are you doing? What's the upside here? What's the future look like? But James Harden, although he has his flaws, still had a really good offensive season. I mean, he was extremely efficient. He was really good as a playmaker. You were a great basketball team with all your stars on the floor. You're losing one of them now, and that's the problem. Now James Harden has to be more consistent than he's capable of at this stage in his career in the playoffs, because he doesn't get to the rim. And that's why, as awesome as he was to start the Dallas series, then you have just a couple of basically no-shows from him, right? I mean, he goes from 33-point masterclass in game 4 to 2 of 12 shooting, giving you 7 points in game 5. That's what happens when you don't create any sort of consistent looks for yourself at the rim. But he's still a star-level offensive contributor, and I think that this is a good move for them to still try to remain a good basketball team, but they should have kept PG if they were trying to do that. Patrick Williams goes back to the Bulls for 5 years, $90 million, Logan. How do you like this?
I know a lot of people see the dollar amount with this and see the $90 million and they freak out and their heads turn on fire. The Bulls front office is very dumb, but this is the one deal that I actually think that the Bulls front office did a good job with. Like, again, I know the bottom dollar like looks insane, but sub $20 million for a solid 3-and-D wing defender. Like, I think in 2 to 3 years, we could be looking at this contract and going, damn, this is a really great value deal. Maybe one of the best contracts in the league. I think this is really good value long-term for a guy like Patrick Williams, just to have him locked up for 5 years, where again, in 5 years, he's going to be making what, under 20 mil. I think it's a good value.
Yeah, I'm with you. You think about how people responded to the Jaden McDaniels deal, which was bigger than this one. And it's like, oh my God, you're playing a role player, $25 million a year. What are you doing? Welcome to the new NBA, ladies and gentlemen. The cap is inflated. All of these numbers are not what you're used to. The cap is at $140 million. It's going to continue to increase over the course of this contract. And this is going to be a totally reasonable contract for a player of Patrick Williams' caliber, in my opinion. It's a long commitment. I don't think there's a particularly high ceiling there, but I do think he'll be a quality starter. I think that he will be a solid 3-and-D forward that you would be happy to have on your roster. I don't think that this is an overpay. Okay, Obi Toppin, Logan, re-signs with the Pacers for 4 years, $60 million. How do you feel about this?
In a vacuum, this is not my favorite contract, but he works in Indiana. And so I'll give him props for that, man. It's to stick around in Indiana where the ball moves fast. He can be a real weapon in transition, set screens. He can cut hard. Like, I think in other basketball situations, I wouldn't like this contract, but specifically in Indiana, this isn't that bad. I like this deal mutually. Maybe a little too much money. Yeah, Obi Toppin, maybe just a little too much, but he works in Indiana, so I don't hate this deal.
I do think it's an overpay, and part of that is just the market that we're seeing for a Derrick Jones Jr., right? Like, boy, I just think that guy is a better all-around basketball player than Obi, who I do think is a Tyrese Halliburton merchant, who I do think is a Pacers merchant. But you know what, man? He does produce in this system. He's athletic as hell. He can play multiple roles. He's a good rim finisher. He shot the ball really well this past year. He obviously has his limitations defensively. The shot isn't something I always trust the most, but it was good this year. He is a relatively valuable piece of a really dynamic Pacers offense. I do think it's an overpay. I would not want to pay him $15 million a year, but it's not egregious. It's not terrible. Okay. Cade Cunningham, Logan, signs a 5-year, $226 million extension to the Pistons. How do you feel about this?
You pay Cade whatever he wants. I mean, this is your franchise guy. This is your only building block. You build him a statue. You
Maybe a little
agree.
premature.
You agree to whatever demands Cade Cunningham makes because you don't really have any options or any other good basketball players. So you pay Cade whatever he wants. Yeah, I mean, he was always going to get the max, like whatever he could get. And Detroit's smart for paying him, man. So good for Cade, man. I'm glad he got his bag.
I remain a Cade optimist. I think that he does have to improve, but there's a lot that he does to me that says lead, star guard, the pull-up shooting is pretty good. The playmaking at his size is really quite good. The defense when he's engaged has been really impressive. He's versatile. He's strong. He's long. He moves his feet well. He can block shots as an on-ball defender. There's a lot that Cade does quite well. And I don't know that he's ever going to be one of the league's elite players, but do I think he'll be one of the league's 25, 30 best players? I do. And at this point, that's a guy who's worth paying the max. And he's a close personal friend of mine. We ran into each other waiting in line at Jungle Cruise at Disneyland. He actually wasn't waiting in line. He was on a private tour. And we talked about this over stogies. And I said, you're going to milk him for everything you can, huh, Cade? And he looked at me with a glint in his eye and he said, of course I am. So there you go. The inside scoop from Carson Breber. Do we want to talk about Max Christie getting extended for 4 years, $32 million?
Not particularly.
Yeah. To that, I say shrug emoji. Weirdest thing about free agency, Logan. I mean, I do kind of like Max Christie. $8 million a year. That's fine. I don't have any problem with that. Why are Woj? I mean, I know why, but Woj tweeting about all of the agents who are getting these deals done. You know, he'll tweet the deal and then he'll quote tweet and he'll say, Najee Marshall's agent, Derek Jackson of UNLTD Sports Group closed on the deal with GM. Like, come on, man. Is it that soulless? You got to fluff your sources that much?
It's kind of funny.
Well, yeah, it's kind of funny, I guess, but it's not supposed to be funny. You clearly don't care. I just don't care that Oubre Jr.'s agent, Dave Spahn of CAA, landed on a deal with Daryl Morey late Sunday.
Dude, Derek Jackson of Unlimited Sports Group closed a deal with GM Nico Harrison to move Marshall out of New Orleans to Dallas.
Told that.
I know. That doesn't fascinate you.
No, it does fascinate me, and I grew up with DJ, so I'm happy to see him pull this off. We used to go tobogganing together, and it was a nice little escape from the harsh reality.
Man, you even got the nickname.
Yeah, that's DJX. I mean, me and D Spawn also, we go way back. We used to go spelunking together. So they're good guys. I'm happy for them. They're getting good stuff done, but it's a bit soulless. Woj, man. Crazy job that he's got. All right. Well, there's still some free agents out there to be signed. There's still some news to be broken, but we did get a lot done today. So hope you guys enjoyed the day of news and hope you guys enjoyed our coverage on it. If you want more Nerd Sesh, then we have plenty more full shows on our YouTube channel. You can listen to the shows across all audio platforms. You can check out our trivia content as well, which we have in short form across social, TikTok, Instagram at Nerd Sesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh, and long form. Throughout the summer, we are going to have lots of fun guests on for trivia, and we will have another episode in that vein very shortly with an awesome guest that you guys are going to want to tune into. Those are super fun. So check out our merch if you want at thevolume.com. Get that hat that Logan's wearing, pluck it right off of his noggin. You can join our Discord to chat with the fellas. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. And if you enjoyed this episode and you are not subscribed, please make sure to do so. You don't want to miss out on what we're doing. You don't want to miss out on all this fun stuff, and that will help make sure that you don't. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Breber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.